You are a smudge on the velvet of this evening. This gala was curated for those who possess the lineage to match the decor, not for someone who clearly rented their presence for the night. I'd suggest you find the service entrance before you embarrass yourself further. Julian Thorne didn't just speak. He sneered with the confidence of a man who believed his name was written in the stars. He stood in the center of the classic grand ballroom, a cathedral of Gilded Age opulence. Towering Corinthian columns draped in gold leaf, floor-to-ceiling tapestries, and a massive, tiered crystal chandelier that cast a sharp, diamond-like glow over the elite. Julian held a flute of champagne. He was looking down at Elena Vance, a woman with deeply pigmented mahogany skin who stood with a quiet authority that seemed to make the very air around her still. She was dressed in a shimmering copper silk floor-length gown, new outfit. "I was invited by the foundation, Mr. Thorne," Elena said, her voice a low, melodic resonance that cut through the orchestral hum. "My presence here is as legitimate as the foundation's debt." The ballroom didn't fall silent. It erupted with the sharp, jagged laughter of the surrounding elite. A woman in a midnight blue velvet wrap leaned against a gilded pillar, smirking at Elena with clinical, high society disdain. "Honestly, Julian," the woman laughed, her sapphires catching the chandelier's light, "she's very committed to the delusion. Invited by the foundation. Maybe she means she's here to collect the coats? Someone should tell her that a silk dress doesn't grant you a seat at the table of the titans." The man beside her joined in, pointing a manicured finger at Elena's copper gown. "I'll give her $1,000 to go stand in the kitchen. She looks like she's built for the back of the house anyway. Go on, Julian. Clear the floor before the real donors arrive." 12 people in the background were ostensibly minding their business, sipping vintage wine or whispering near the string quartet, but 8 others were acting as active witnesses, leaning in to catch every second of the humiliation with judgmental grins. Julian Thorne finally lost his composure. In a moment of raw, unposed physical aggression, he didn't just mock her. He raised his hand and delivered a sharp, stinging slap across Elena's face, the sound echoing off the marble walls like a gunshot. "I said leave," Julian hissed, his face twisted in a mask of vicious mockery. "Security, get this loiterer out of my gala." The laughter in the ballroom was a physical weight. Elena didn't cry. She didn't scream. She slowly turned her head back, her eyes meeting Julian's with a coldness that caused his smirk to falter. "You've spent your life thinking this gold leaf makes you a king, Julian?" Elena whispered, the coldness in her tone causing the witnesses' laughter to die. "But you forgot that kings only rule as long as they own the land. You didn't just slap a guest. You just struck the silent partner who owns 51% of your holding company. And as of this second, I've decided to demolish the House of Thorne. Thanks for the support. We couldn't do this without you. Subscribe for free to help us keep bringing you more stories. Where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments. Now, back to the story." She didn't move as 2 security guards in charcoal suits approached. She stood with lethal calmness, while the woman in the midnight blue wrap toasted her exit with a mocking laugh, unaware that her own portfolio was about to evaporate. The heavy oak doors of the ballroom didn't just open. They were flanked by a phalanx of 6 men in charcoal gray tactical suits, and a lead attorney carrying a briefcase that seemed to weigh more than the massive, tiered crystal chandelier hanging above them. At their head was Marcus Reed, the city's most ruthless corporate executioner. He didn't look at the priceless tapestries or the vintage champagne. He walked straight past the trembling waiters and the frozen elite, stopping exactly 3 paces in front of Elena Vance. He didn't look at Julian. He bowed so deeply to Elena that his silk tie brushed the marble floor. "Madam Chairwoman," Marcus's voice boomed, a jagged, authoritative sound that sent an immediate shockwave of silence through the grand ballroom. "The emergency board resolution has been ratified. The hostile conduct clause in the partnership agreement has been triggered. You are now the sole voting authority for the Thorne Legacy Trust. The liquidation of Julian Thorne's personal assets has officially begun." The silence that followed was so absolute it felt like the very air in the ballroom had turned to ice. Julian Thorne, who had been adjusting his tuxedo cuffs with an arrogant smirk, felt his heart skip a beat. His face, once a mottled red of aggressive laughter, drained of color until he was the shade of the white marble columns. "Marcus? What is this insanity?" Julian finally managed to wheeze, his voice sounding thin and pathetic beneath the golden rafters. "This woman, she's a nobody. She's a weight and balance issue for my brand. I'm the Legacy. I'm the Thorne." "Julian, shut your mouth," Marcus said, his voice dripping with a professional pity that was more lethal than a physical blow. "You aren't the Legacy. You're the liability. You've been running this empire on a line of credit that Elena's private equity firm quietly purchased when you were on the brink of collapse last winter. You thought you were cleansing your gala of an intruder. You didn't realize that the woman you just struck is the person who owns the mortgage on this ballroom, the title to your yacht, and the very clothes you're standing in. You didn't just slap a guest, Julian. You just evicted yourself from your own life." Elena stepped forward, her shimmering copper silk gown catching the brilliant, high-contrast light of the chandelier. The red mark on her deeply pigmented mahogany skin didn't look like a wound. It looked like a brand of war. The witnesses who had been laughing seconds ago, the woman in the midnight blue wrap and the man who offered $1,000 for her to stand in the kitchen, were now frantically trying to blend into the shadows, their faces caught in masks of sudden, terrified realization. "You were so worried about the lineage of this evening, Julian," Elena whispered, her voice a low, lethal hum that seemed to vibrate the floorboards. "But the only thing devaluing this room is your lack of foresight. Marcus, trigger the reputational damage clawback immediately. This man just engaged in a public display of physical assault against the majority shareholder in front of 20 witnesses. That is a Tier 1 breach. His trust fund? Frozen. His family estate? Reclaimed. His name on the foundation? Scrape it off the stone by midnight. You can't do this," Julian roared, reaching out to grab a security guard's arm. But the guard, recognizing the new source of his paycheck, stepped back with clinical indifference, letting Julian stumble. "Robert, tell her, we've been inner circle for 30 years. Stand up for the Thorne name." Robert didn't even look up from his drink. He turned his back to Julian and struck up a quiet conversation with a waiter, effectively erasing 30 years of friendship in a single, cold movement.
The onlookers, sensing the shift in the wind, turned on Julian like a pack of starved wolves. "He always was a barbaric little man," the woman in the midnight blue wrap whispered loudly, her voice now aimed directly at Elena's favor. "We were all so horrified when he raised his hand. Truly, it was the act of a desperate, small-minded coward. We are so relieved someone with actual class is taking over the Legacy." Elena didn't grant them the mercy of a glance. "Clear the floor. I have a demolition crew coming in to handle the rebranding of this estate, and I'd hate for you to get in their way. Security, please escort Mr. Thorne to the sidewalk. As he so eloquently put it, there's a service entrance in the back. He should get used to the view from the pavement." As the tactical team gripped Julian's arms to drag him out of the ballroom, Elena stood alone beneath the light of the chandelier, the undisputed owner of a $1 billion future, while the man who mocked her was hauled out into the cold night, his legacy erased before the orchestra could even finish the set.